From Revelation 13. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Greetings, friends. Welcome back to the broadcast. Today, we are resuming our study in the book of Revelation. And we are looking at chapter 13 today, which deals, well, it's only 18 verses, but it deals with a handful of things. We have 2 beasts coming out of one out of the earth, one out of the sea. We have what's known as the mark of the beast described. We have this false prophet type described. And there's a couple of things to note before we start. Number 1, everything being done here by Satan is just a counterfeit of the things that God has done. One example would be the mark. You know, God marked his people on their foreheads, which is figurative, right? It's that we're marked, we're sealed with the Holy Spirit. In the same way, the enemy has to mark. There's a parody here of the Trinity, if you will. That's pretty easy to see. It's all just a counterfeit. It's all deception. It's all lies. And I think you'll pick up on that theme here. And also, I want to remind you that we are looking at this from the perspective, not just ours and how it might play out or manifest in our day, which we do believe that it will, but it was also very relevant and manifesting and coming alive in the day of the people who were reading it in the form of the Roman Empire. And it's you can't really separate that. When you try to separate that, you give yourself too much rope, if you will, to come up with all kinds of crazy ideas. But we will look at it. So I'm going to read the first 18 verses uninterrupted, and then we'll kind of go back through. I'll give you some commentary from the early church perspective, and we'll also talk about how it might look in our day. So with that, open up your hearts and be willing and able to receive from God truth and wisdom from the scriptures. All right. Please allow me to read Revelation 13. Verse 1. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And on the 10 horns, crowns, and on his head a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him power, his throne, and great authority. And I saw one of the heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. So they worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast? Who was able to make war with him? And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of the life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And if anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity, and he who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great signs so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast, who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on the right hand and on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except those who have the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. All right. Let's have a look here. There's a lot of symbolism, and I believe this was on purpose in John's day because he couldn't just come right out and call out the powers to be. There had to be some code, if you will. I'm going to give you both perspectives here. There's a sense in which it was being lived out and fulfilled in the day of the people it was written to. This is just fact. But there's a sense of where it's speaking to us in our day. And we can really look at this and see how this could very easily develop in our time. And so let's have a look at it a little bit closer. So he says, I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw the beast rising out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns. On his heads blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like a bear, and his mouth like a lion. So it's very reminiscent of Daniel, the book of Daniel. Daniel's given the image of these world powers. They're described in different ways, but one of the ways they're described is as animals, bear, eagle, these types of things. And the important thing is that it symbolized different nations, different kingdoms, if you will. And I think that's probably what's happening here. Different kingdoms are being represented with this imagery. The more important thing is that their power and their authority comes from Satan. Right? The next verse says, the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and his great authority. One of the reasons people think that this is not just talking about a kingdom, but an actual person, that we'll just use the label Antichrist, even though Antichrist is never used in the Bible to describe a single individual, and the only person who ever uses that phrase is John, and he uses it to really as a blanket description, not in the way that we use it today when we talk about prophecy. But when we say Antichrist, we know who we're talking about, right? We're talking about a world leader who comes on the scene, given the authority and power by Satan, to rule over the nations. He's the Antichrist. Like, we know what we're talking about when we use that phrasing. Here's kind of the Orthodox study Bible view of this passage here. It says the beast rising up out of the sea is a composite of 4 beasts like Daniel 7. And it is an epitome of worldly kingdoms opposed to God and his kingdom. For John, this was the Roman Empire. a monstrous creature with 10 horns, meaning very powerful, 7 heads, the emperors, 10 crowns on its heads, and blasphemous names, meaning the emperors themselves assume titles such as divinity and Lord and God and Savior and even Son of God. These leaders were literally calling themselves these divine names. In parody, where from chapter 5, verses 12 through 14, where the sacrificed lamb is enthroned, the beast is given power, not to bless the church, but to persecute it. One of the heads of the monsters was as though it had been slaughtered to death, as another parody of the lamb, which was standing even though it had been slain. So it's this idea that, just like Christ came back from the dead, in a way, Satan wants to perform a similar miracle, although it'll probably just be deception, right? Where there's a deadly wound, but then he's healed. The reason I think that we're not just that we're talking about two things, that we're talking about a governmental power and an individual person, is because of the way the Bible describes it. It doesn't continue to say, and the beast or the dragon gave the beast power and a throne. It uses words like this: the dragon gave him his power. The dragon gave him his throne and great authority. And we know who the dragon is because the Bible already identified that for us earlier, saying it is the dragon, the serpent of old, Satan. And his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. And so they worshipped the dragon and gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who's like the beast, and who is able to make war with him?" Another important thing to note about the past was that Nero died by having his throat slit, and the person that came after him, people believed was Nero himself reincarnated. And there was people who were actually expecting Nero to rise from the dead, to be resurrected. I mean, this was thinking in those circles at that time because of the prophecies that had been written. We'll get to Nero more here in a bit, but I would not be surprised if we saw a similar event happen in our day, where there becomes a world-governing kingdom. I mean, we're almost there. We're almost there. The United States is kind of the last piece of the puzzle. Then an appointed leader, right? And then this appointed leader, it says, is going to have a mouth speaking things blasphemous. He's going to blaspheme God, even blaspheme the tabernacle, and blaspheme even those who dwell in heaven. This is really bizarre that he would come out and blaspheme even those who dwell in heaven. And so the world's going to look at this, and they're going to say, who's like this? Who can make war with him? We just have to submit to this. We have to submit to his authority, even unto the point of worship. And this is the key. This is the key to the whole thing. People are always trying to figure out who it is, and was the mark of the beast this thing? Was it that thing? Was it this thing? Here's an easy way to know. It will involve very clearly worship. It's not something that you can receive by accident or be tricked. This will involve worship. This will involve allegiance to the beast. That is the key, most important thing. How it's administered isn't as important as what's required to have it administered, which is allegiance and worship to the beast. Continuing on here. He was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. So this 42 months, 3.5 years, is used often. It's believed to be basically the back half of a 7 years. So again, I'll just go to the Orthodox study notes here. Here's kind of their belief. 42 months is the final period of the apocalyptic conflict. It is 1/2 of 7 years, not the final end of things. Thus, the nations trample over the holy city for 3.5 years, right? Revelation 11:2. The two witnesses prophesy for 3.5 years, Revelation 11:3. And then they are left unburied for 3.5 days. The woman is persecuted in the wilderness for 3.5 years. And here's the crazy thing. Is Nero's persecution, when he was doing the severe persecution of Christians, it was approximately 42 months long. That is not a coincidence. Verse 7, it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given to him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. That's an important thing to note. Number one, he has authority to overcome the saints. Number two, he's given authority over everything. Every tribe, every language, every nation. There's nothing that's not brought under submission to the beast. All who dwell on the... Listen, verse 8. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, with one exception, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. There's going to be people who think they're Christians, but they're out of fear, out of coercion, And listen, if you think that that people won't just line up to do whatever they're told, maybe you need to be transported back to 2020. It doesn't take much in the form of pressure, in the form of coercion. People were willing to do just about anything, and there wasn't even nearly that much at stake, really. In this situation, what's at stake is death. And people who think themselves Christians, you just watch how many of them line up to worship the beast. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. There's different ways to kind of view that verse. I've always looked at it as, hey, if you participate in doing this, gathering people into captivity and doing all this evil, it's kind of like you dug your own ditch, you're going to fall into your own pit type of thing. It's also been looked at like it really means something else. It could be better rendered, if you will. He who is destined for captivity, he who is destined for the sword. It's kind of like it's going to happen, whether you like. It has to happen. It's predetermined that it's going to happen. So that is a viewpoint as well. So we had the one beast, but remember here, there's like a parody of a trinity here. So here comes part 2. Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth who had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. This is incredibly important. This person will appear like a lamb. He may even claim to be a Christian or something of that nature. But the words that come out of his mouth are like a dragon. Now, I'm hesitant to say this, but it just is kind of an example of this. Hesitant to say it, but I'll say it anyway. One example to me would be like recently, very, very recently, the Pope came out and said that all paths lead to God. Clear heresy, right? But the Pope is considered the leader of the largest body of Christians in the world, being the Roman Catholic Church. And that to me is like somebody who is supposed to represent the Lamb, but speaks things that are just heretical. He says he represents Christ, that he's the vicar of Christ on earth, but then goes on to speak a great heresy, saying that all paths lead to heaven. That is not what the church believes. That's not even what the Roman Catholic Catechism believes, much less the church by and large. So that, to me, it'll be even worse than that. But that would be like, those are type of things that kind of go off, like put a little alarm bells off for me, where I'm like, hey, why are you saying these things? That doesn't even represent what the church teaches. Like, the Roman Catholic Church doesn't even teach that according to their own councils, according to their own catechism. So it's like a lamb dragon type of thing to me. And I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to get into a big discussion because we're not all starting from the same place when it comes to church history knowledge and all of that. And I don't have time to get into all that today. Verse 12, and he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. So he has the same authority as the beast who's ruling over the world. Causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Even going so far as to perform miracles. It says he performs great signs so that even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. He deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs, which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast. That's interesting. It seems like he can only perform these miracles in the sight of the beast, right? Just an important thing to note. He was granted to do inside of, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast, whose wound was by the sword, who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power over the breath. He was given power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and causes many who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So you have kind of you have a parody, a copy, an attempt. It's really a blasphemous parody of the Holy Trinity is what I'm trying to say. You've got the beast, false prophet, and the image of the beast. The image of the beast, I've always imagined being some type of artificial intelligence. In our day, this just doesn't seem like it would be that hard to accomplish, does it? I mean, I can imagine reading that when I first was reading the book of Revelation, like 20-some years ago. Some of these things were like really hard to imagine. Like, what could it be? But in our day, we've got like handfuls of things that we could go to, right? Like, we could all have a different opinion of what the image of the beast might be, and we could all come up with a reasonable thing that exists in our day that could become that, right? Or we see the beginnings of it at least. And here's the key. Again, I said the key is worship, because this is really what Satan seems to really seek. He wants to be worshipped. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So if you refuse to worship, you can be killed. He causes all, both small, great, rich, and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand and on their foreheads, that no one may buy or sell except those, the mark or the name, the beast, with a number of his name. Again, this is not hard for me to fathom. I did a podcast 4 years ago called The Mask of the Beast. If you remember, you had to put a diaper over your face if you wanted to buy food and groceries, and people were more than happy to line up with it and to go along with it. And even to this day, they do it. And there's some listening to me right now who are mad that I dared compare it, because they're all for that thing and what the media is telling them about it, right? That is so small scale to what we're reading in the Bible about the cost. The cost of not worshiping the beast is potential death, right? Not the fear that you might get ill, not peer pressure on social media and from the people you work with and with friends and family. No, it's literally life and death. Big difference. And so my point is, I've seen in our time people take orders to do ridiculous things for a lot less. So this idea that people would line up for the mark, I mean, that's easy for me to see. That's easy to see. Easy to see that happening. All right, let's get to this part, the last verse. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So let's get some important information here. At that time, letters of the alphabet. This is true in Hebrew. Those of you who are Hebrew students, you know this. It's also true in Greek. The letters of the alphabet were used as numbers in ancient times, and so they could be pretty easily calculated. The number of the beast is the numerical equivalent of the letters of the name of a man. It's also important to note that some manuscripts actually don't say 666; they say 616 instead of the well-known 666. But for them, it didn't change who they were the conclusion that they were coming to. So the numerical equivalent for Nero Caesar, translated from Greek into Hebrew, was 666. And the numerical equivalent of Nero Caesar, translated from Latin into Hebrew, was 616. So no matter what, Nero was the conclusion of that day. And so it will be, I believe, in the end, the very last of things, the very final version of this. It'll be the same thing. That, my friends. Oh, here's something else to note, just real quick, about that. So we can say, well, they clearly thought it was Nero, right? Not hard to come up with. But by 100 years later, by the time you get to Irenaeus, well-known church father, he's writing that they have no idea who the 666 is going to be. So already at 100 years after this whole scenario with the Roman Empire, or after the book of Revelation, after the Apostle John, we already have church fathers writing that they don't know who it's going to be. So it's already at that point becoming a possibility for a future fulfillment. So there you have it. I may not have covered everything that you were hoping, but I'm doing the best I can with the time that I have. And I hope I haven't offended too many of you by pointing out some of the recent absurdities that's taken place around the world in the last 4 years. But the reality is I think that was just the beginning. What we might see just in the coming months, just in the next couple of months, friends, might be far more grievous. Make sure you're walking close with the Lord, and that you're being kind and merciful and loving to the brethren. Because if the Lord comes back today, we don't want him to say, hey, you're on the left side because I needed food and you didn't care. I needed clothing, you didn't care. I was sick, you didn't care. I was in jail, you didn't care. I don't want to be the person who's like, when did we ignore you in all these situations? And he says, whatever you did to the least of these, you did unto me. I don't want to be like the servant who thought his master was delaying his coming. He went back to his sin. And when the master returned, his portion was appointed with the hypocrites. Come quickly, Lord Jesus, come quickly. Maranatha, peace and grace be with all of you. And until next time, God bless.